So yeah, give it one more moment and I will start.
We are live.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to Open Signal Labs Conversation with Ebony Adams. My name is Rashonda Brooks. I am the project coordinator for Open Signal Labs, and alongside Jeff Oliver and Ifani Bell. Open Signal Labs is a Open Signal Labs is here to help foster connections with Black creatives. We also have a film fellowship that supports 6 filmmakers here in Portland. These conversations we have for the Black community and share this space to just get to know other filmmakers, media makers that are, out in the world, out in Portland, out in nationwide, everywhere. Um, so I'm really happy to have Ebony here. She is a part of Women in Film. She's an educator. She's a screenwriter, and what I am starting to also get to know, just a pretty amazing person. Ebony, thank you for being with us today, and
Thank
we
you so
can,
much for having me.
yeah, and we can just get started.
Okay, okay.
Mhm. So I ended up finding out about Ebony because I went to a Women in Film event, and she was the moderator, and she had a director name by the name of Sam Bailey on that I really like. But Ebony's just presence during that conversation I just found very engaging, and I really appreciated that she just extended herself, at the end of the call for anybody to reach out. So that is exactly what I did. And we were able to chat it up about her work at Women in Film, time she spent here living in Portland, actually, and just other creative projects that she has going on. And I'm just really grateful for the connections and what is happening here, because I think it's very, very important as Black people that we continue to connect with each other, regardless if it's virtual or in person. And I'm just also personally all about connecting with people. So, with that being said, Ebony, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? You know, how you got into, well, one, film, and also your education background. What started first, and how does one inform the other?
Right. I think like a lot of Black people and people of color more broadly, I was not aware that being a screenwriter working in the film industry was a job that you could have. I'm not sure where the disconnect happened. Like, I watched a lot of TV, I watched a lot of movies, but as far as I was concerned, magic is how they ended up on the screen. Like, I wasn't aware that there were people working behind the scenes. And certainly no one I knew or someone who looked like me was visible as a creative, growing up. So I came to the idea of screenwriting and working within the industry very late. I went to school um, to become a professor. I got my graduate degree in English. I taught for a while, and the writing that I have done consistently just kept like tugging on me. And so eventually it was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, I need to move to LA and make it happen. Because that's the next stage in the delusion, is that first you don't know that working in the industry is a job you can have, and then the next step is moving to LA and thinking, oh, this is a job I can have, right? So I had to be disabused of a lot of myths around what it takes to do this stuff.
Mhm.
But so, taught for a while at the college level, and I really, even though I am no longer interested in being an instructor of that sort, I really credit those kind of environments for really kind of shaping and honing my critical eye in a way. It has affected so much about the kind of media I consume, but also the kind of media that hopefully that I create, or that I hope to create. So yeah, taught, then moved to LA, and pretty immediately anyway, started working in the nonprofit space. Have been very lucky to end up in the nonprofit space. like marrying my beliefs and my hopes for social justice with, you know, the work that actually pays me a check, even though, you know, you work for nonprofits, the check is not big. You know, as my friend Cedric used to say, we're doing the Lord's work for the Lord's wages. Like, you're not going to get rich doing this work. But yeah, worked for an organization that raised money for cancer and leukemia research, then moved to an organization called Feminist Frequency that I'm still affiliated with. I'm still on the board, still co-host the podcast there, which is a feminist media analysis organization.
Nice.
And then ended up, you know, with incredible luck at Women in Film, and where the message, the goal, the value is how do we increase equity across the board in the screen industries, specifically along the axes of gender, race, ability, class, etc. Right? You know, because there's so much that still needs to be done. We can break our arms patting ourselves on the back about the gains that have been made. A recent study just came out from UCLA celebrating the, you know, greater numbers of us in front of the camera who are being cast. And it's like, how are we at the point where in the year 2021, we're still celebrating a 2% increase or a 5% increase? And also, like, you know, I told you I was gonna get into this, like the issue of representation, but I do not want more Black cops on screen. That is not progress to me.
No.
You know, I don't want more women CIA agents on screen. That doesn't equal progress to me. So yeah, it's been just an issue of like really unpacking what kind of industry do I want to be in? And luckily, Women in Film has afforded me the opportunities to have those kind of conversations with people and foster those kind of conversations with our membership and the larger, you know, artistic community like y'all, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, especially about the fact of like the patting on the back of where we have come, you know, where we've come from to where we go, but it's just like so still so small. You know, when you look at these statistics or whatever, it's not like we went from 2% to 12 or 2% to 20. It's just like from 2% to 2%, you know, and to your point too, it's still it still almost feels kind of like the same. You can see more quote unquote shows on mainstream TV that have, you know, more Black people or Black and brown people. And then often it's still either sadly some Black trauma, or it's like you said, it's a cop, detective, CSI, you know, whatever, but it's still not often just, sometimes I don't even really like to use the word normal, but like sometimes we just need some carefree, joyful Blackness, you know, like not pain, you know, people, yes, that's still a reality. And I'm not trying to act like that shouldn't be shown or anything, but it would just be nice that these impacts are really more impactful and expressive, and just also giving us space to like really create and mess up. You know, like there are so many shows that are out here that are not good. Where our space, you know, to do that? And to me, that's not also not the goal to make not good shows, but you know, where's our space?
Wait, isn't it though? You know, like if you look at the amount of shows, the amount of money they're throwing at someone like Chuck Lorre, for instance, right? Like, where's our 2.5 Men? I hate that show, Big Bang Theory, like all that stuff. But I want, you know, a brother or a sister in the position to make that kind of money. Even with shows I hate, you know, because hopefully it will mean that, you know, we're part of an ecosystem in which we have the room to fail, you know, at the same rate that we have the room to succeed. And of course, I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth right now because now I'm getting in trouble, because I do think there is a problem when with some of the art that we are allowed to create.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking specifically of people like Tyler Perry, right? Like, it's not so much that I'm not a fan of Tyler Perry's work. What I'm not a fan of is the way in which, you know, his organization like consistently doesn't use union writers, for instance, you know, like there's more to it than that. So, okay, I'm saying I want us to have the space to mess up, but at the same time, I'm like, y'all, there's not enough of us to be messing up yet. So we need to figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think like, have y'all been following the conversation around the show Them on Amazon right now?
No, but I have seen some of the conversation. I'm not following, but I'm aware. I saw the trailer. I am personally uninterested. But continue.
Well, I mean, what's interesting to me is that, you know, people are saying we're in a golden age for Black horror in particular, you know, and they point to people like Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta, documentaries like, you know, Horror Noir, which is fantastic.
Yes, yeah, Xavier, the director, on our one of our conversations.
Yeah, so you know, there's something very exciting happening right now in horror in the way that it has really allowed for a flowering of creativity in ways that it traditionally has not. Horror as a genre has been very conservative in the past. So we're talking about a golden age of horror right now. Some people are. But so people are saying, you know, there's this show Them on Amazon. Lena Waithe is an executive producer on the show. I think Little Marvin is the creative or the showrunner behind the show. And it involves scenes of really graphic, gory, hyper violence against Black people. And so part of the reaction to this show is, why this? And why now? And why always this?
Yeah.
And what's the quantitative difference between, you know, the violence you see in a show like Them and then maybe one like Us? And people are also like, okay, you're not clever. Them, Us, we see you, Lil Marvin. Like, you know, you can't just ride this train, right? And so it goes back to your point of like, you know, trauma on Black people and why this seems like such a ready buffet that people want to eat from. I'm less interested in the question of whether we should have shows like that or whether we should have movies like that, but answering the question, who are these for? Who created them? Who is bankrolling them? And who are these for? I have not seen them yet. I'm a huge horror fan, but there are certain types of horror that I have to gird myself to watch.
Yes.
And by and large, it's things in which hyperviolence is enacted upon Black people.
Yes.
You know, I have to be ready for something like that.
For real.
And it's not uncommon, right, for other Black people to say like, okay, I can't just go in and watch 12 Years a Slave, or like, I need to prepare myself to sit with this.
Right.
A white audience member does not need to do that. Amazon is not asking themselves like, oh, are people going to be, you know, afraid to watch this or uncomfortable with watching this? Because they're assuming that the bulk of the audience is going to be, you know, white people, and that it's going to, you know, generate enough cultural conversation. And you can see from the way that the stories are framed in Them that part of it is about not speaking to a Black audience, even though there are Black creators behind the show, but speaking to a white audience and saying, look at this trauma, look at this violence, you know, look at this pain, look at this agony. And so you got to ask yourself, like, to what end, or at what point are we no longer being used or using ourselves as a tool to educate other communities? You know,
yeah.
So that's for me a more interesting question. I don't think that we should, you know, and I don't think, you know, a lot of people are arguing this, but just as like a straw man, the idea that, you know, we should only focus on like Black joy as opposed to Black pain. No, I do think there needs to be, you know, a more like organic and free-flowing kind of global sense of Blackness available to us.
Yes.
But since we seem to keep wanting to see images of us enslaved, images of us in pain, images of us brutalized by the police, we have to ask ourselves, who is creating those stories and for whom are they being created? You know,
that's really
it's often not us.
No, that's super real. So it's funny that you brought this up on a lot of levels. I mean, one, Jeff and I have talked about this before, but we talked about it more so with now I can't think of it.
Lovecraft Country.
Thank you. It's not a horror per se, but there's, yes, a lot of Black trauma, and I was just like, I am not interested. So I didn't even, I think I maybe got up to the third episode or so, and then I was just like, I'm cool. And on top of the trauma, it was also the other ways, to me, of the same tropes that I've just tropes. You know how tropes work. So it's just too much of that, the repetition of it. And then just on a little bit of a side note, I ended up on social media, maybe like not I ended up on social media, but I was on social media like maybe a month ago, and someone was sharing another person's TikTok about how they hired a woman to play a background character, basically colorism. Hired a light skinned woman to play a darker skinned woman in a photo. She didn't even play a role. She was just the extra. And they darkened her skin and everything. And I'm like, yes, I understood what the person who was sharing it, not the person in the TikTok, was saying, because it's ridiculous, one, and it feeds into the same system. Like, well, why couldn't you hire a brown skinned, a dark skinned person versus, doing all of this to one, like, it's beyond me. And to the point, yes, we should have some both. There should be a more global spectrum of the art that we create. I think that's always been the argument and what we've been trying to do. But yes, to the point of trauma, who is this for? Why are we doing this? And especially in the climate that we're in, not that this is new climate, sadly. It's not progressing us, it's not healthy, it's not helpful, and I'm very over it.
And we know that there are, I'm going to use one of my $10 grad school words, but, there are deleterious effects about seeing Black people in pain.
Yes.
Constantly, right? And I think in particular about studies done on treatment of, Black people in the medical sciences.
Yeah.
And there's a fundamental belief among many doctors, nurses,
Yes.
law enforcement, that we experience pain less than white people. You have to wonder how often seeing images of ourselves being brutalized, seeing Black people brutalized, and then what? Continuing to live, continuing, to survive, feeds into this notion that we are not people, in the same way that there is something endemic to ourselves that allows us to experience pain in a way that is, somehow less severe, less intense than other people's, but also that there's something within us that calls that violence down upon us. And I don't think these things are happening at the conscious level. I think it's like that pernicious unconscious bias that we all have to unpack. But you do wonder, like, it's not a one-to-one. You see, cops brutalizing a Black man on Law and Order, and that causes you to think, oh, Black men, do X, Y, and Z, right? But I think it all feeds into that, and we're doing ourselves a disservice if we aren't critical, of the media that we're consuming, and I invite myself here. As much as I say, like, I don't want more Black cops on screen, I don't want more female cops on screen, spies, tools of the state, whatever. There's still a part of me that will be smoothed into a Law and Order nap every weekend, right? Like, I'm a slave to the propaganda, It is everywhere. It is overwhelming. And the genre is so satisfying. It is so seductive. And it is so easy to surrender to its appeal. And then it's based on assumptions. And the next thing you know, you're like, well, okay. I say, defund the police, but also maybe surveillance is good, and we should have more closed, circuit TVs to prevent, or why was that person on that corner, whatever. It's so pernicious.
But I think we all end up making those choices, meaning that, like, we still want to see this thing. We still want to see more Black creators, more content, more options, more healthier options, etc. And also, there's the one show or the two shows that that's your escapism. I sometimes still watch reality TV. That's the thing. But I also am very particular about what I am consuming, the reasons why. Like, I know this is the one show that I'm going to watch. I am not about to go out and watch all these other reality shows, because I also know what that's going to do to my brain and such. And, like, similar to the cop shows, similar to anything else that is, destructive to us, I think that we should have a little space, for both. Not that you just want to go out inherently and do destructive things, but, like, if that's what you're feeling, then so be it. But there should be opportunity to have both, and that has been like a large limit for us because they just kind of keep rehashing the same thing again and again, and then as these little as a little bit of progress comes through, then people want to say, well, look at the difference, when it really isn't much of a difference.
Right.
And some of what you were saying too about it just also makes me think about the connections of these things and the timing. Like when you have these TV shows and sadly all this black death that is actually happening in real life, like we all know all of this stuff is systemic and that all goes together. And then I really just start to think about the timing of things because TV is planned out. This systematic life we live in is planned out. So I'm not saying like they're like, oh, we're gonna put this show out and then we're also gonna keep killing black people at the same rate, but it's almost like that's what they're saying to each other. So
yeah, we will never run out of cop shows on TV, at least, for the foreseeable future. And every version of cop shows, whether it's, reality shows. So you remember like in the wake of George Floyd protests last year, they pulled Cops from the air. Cops is back. So like the reality TV version of it, to like, procedurals like, CSI, Law and Order, et cetera. There's a new version of Law and Order. Elliot Stabler is back, caked up, whatever, as people say, to like prestige TV, things like True Detective. Every flavor of it is here and it's here to stay. And so, the idea that the media that we consume has only a tangential relationship to the things that we believe, or that we are fully in control of how it affects us. We really need to unpack that, right? Because this idea that like Derek Chauvin is a bad apple. You can only have the opinion of the police that the problem is one or two, or even a handful of bad police, but that the institution itself is fine if you have, subscribed to the kind of belief that the police are performing a fundamental service to society. And that is what ultimately all of these shows say, that the police are necessary, that we need to entrust them with these extraordinary powers. And again, I say, I will tune into these shows myself. I will go from watching, results of a trial, like the Derek Chauvin trial, and then tune into something like Mayor of Easttown on HBO and be like, yo, this show is bomb. Kate Winslet is great as this detective. I still have not uncoupled that myself, but we need to figure this out, because I can say on this Zoom with you, okay, propaganda, let's unpack it. I'm consuming this stuff critically. Guess what? CBS don't care whether I'm consuming it critically. They don't care if I'm in this Zoom with y'all. I can write X number of blog posts. I can talk on my podcast about it. They're just like, we got your views. Ding. So really, what am I doing? At what point do, I actually make a decision as a consumer or as a creative? If you're someone who is creating this stuff, writing these things, signing on to direct these episodes, at what point do you say, no more?
That's one of the things I want to touch on, the idea that you kind of touched on with your own experiences, where you're outside of the business and you're just desperate to get any traction in. So you're like, oh yeah, I'll write a spec that's a cop show because that's what people need. Like those are the ways that you're kind of perched on the edge of the industry, because I got to circle back. I got to do all these things. This is what's popular. This is what they want. This is what they want me to write. And so and then you might get it. And then I'm a huge Black horror fan. And so like all the stuff you're talking about, like we've talked about it a little bit when we had Xavier on talking about horror noir. And Rashawn and I had long conversations about Lovecraft Country and Antebellum when that movie came out. I was so excited for that movie because I was like, oh, I love Black horror. I want to see this. And then watched it and like in horror, and just like, this is traumatic. This is maybe one of the most traumatic films. Like when I watched 12 Years a Slave, I was ready for 12 Years a Slave. Antebellum, I thought it was gonna have a little more Jordan Peele, a little more like self-knowledge about what we want to see in something like that. And it was so traumatic to watch. And then afterwards, I have to kind of set it aside and go, okay, Black people, we haven't had this much chance to tell all these horror stories. Like, I know writing these stories, for me, like when I write a thing, it's a hugely cathartic thing to write a screenplay about something, and whatever I'm going through, and it's processing. But sometimes, yeah, when it's on the screen, when it's, like becoming a white woman on Lovecraft Country, or like the brutality of Antebellum, like there's these things that you're like, well, we need to find a space where we can critically talk about this, and make sure that like we're on the same page, and we haven't had that space before. It's one of the reasons we've brought this up multiple times in these conversations, is Black creatives haven't really had these spaces where we attempt something, and then maybe we're like, hey, that's not great. Like that's that, and even, I've written stories, and then you look back 6 months later and go like, oh, I don't want that getting out there, because that's just like, maybe I was processing something, but like there needs to be a not a filter, but there needs to be like back and forth in these creative conversations. And there just hasn't been that in the Black community for
horror is
ever.
such an interesting field and medium for this, right? Because you have things like Antebellum, you have things like Get Out, Us, the original Candyman, the remake that's coming out, and a host of everything. Like these are just kind of mainstream ones, right? But you got to ask yourself, what could we do if we had Alien, but it was an all Black cast, or The Exorcist, which talk about, like things you got to prepare yourself to watch, but, like there are certain slots that they will allow us to occupy no matter the genre, and it is almost inconceivable for them to imagine us outside of those slots. But crucially and sadly, it is hard for us to imagine ourselves outside of those slots. And so, yeah, you talk about someone trying to break in, that if you write a cop show, CBS, ABC, NBC, Netflix, everybody is going to be that much, because they know that stuff sells, versus someone saying, oh, I want to do something set, in the post office, and it's all Black and brown people and whatever. There's no model for that. They are trying to sell to an audience that wants either chocolate or vanilla. And if you, do like butter pecan, okay, yeah, there are gonna be people who love it, but they don't know how big that audience is. They don't know how much they can trust that audience. So it becomes easier to just slot yourself into these predetermined grooves. And so stuff just keeps getting replicated. I bet if we could take a look at the development slates of every single network right now, the overwhelming majority of it is gonna be either cop shows or law enforcement adjacent. The overwhelming majority.
And then that also gets into, oh, my bad, Elijah.
No, I was just thinking that when we're seeing this stuff replicated, to me, it just presents great opportunity. I feel like the field is wide open to create all sorts of things. You know what I mean? And am I wrong in assuming that there's a need for content right now? I mean, is I don't know what it looks like. I would love to be on the end as far as what folks need, how that looks, how do I get in and all that. But I just feel like there's so much room to dance in because of all this replication that I feel like it's a great time. But how I get my stories in there, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation or question. But I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, you're a little closer.
I think you're right that there's definitely a greater need for content right now than perhaps there had been. And obviously, like, we're coming off an anomalous year, 2020. So a lot of things that were in development, in production, were either delayed or canceled outright. And so I think, we're in a difficult time that people really don't know how to assess what's necessary. I think we are also fundamentally looking at a change in the kinds of stories that are going to be told, at least for a while. So the kind of like set pieces that involved, tons of people in a small space, you're not going to see that for a while. I think we're going to see lots of, like smaller stories, more intimate kinds of stories, things that are easier to shoot, things that don't involve, huge crews. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So yes, there absolutely is space for that. But I guess I would suggest that when we talk about the need for more content in this period, what I would suggest is that it's like, going to the store and saying, okay, I want to get, peanut butter, I want to get, juice boxes, and I want to get chips. You've already decided what 3 things you're looking for. There may be tons of different versions of it, but you're still getting those same 3 things. And so, I think, what a lot of artists and creatives are saying now is, okay, I know you like the chips, but how about getting some fruit, or how about getting something else? Like, when do we, expand? Since you need this new content, who is looking for things that are new? Who is looking for people that are new? Again, we talked, I mentioned Chuck Lorre, right? Chuck Lorre, they're gonna throw money at that dude all the time. How about giving some of that money to a new showrunner? Someone who's gonna do something different than, a standard, like single cam, sitcom, or multicam, sitcom, or whatever. So if there's increased opportunity, who has access to those opportunities, and what are we giving them the opportunity to do? There's no gotcha to this question. It really is a question we all need to be asking ourselves, and okay, I've made, it's clear if you've been listening to me, where my politics lie. I don't hide that. But if you are someone who's like, okay, cool, that's you, Ebony, I would love to be writing on Law and Order. I would love to be, working on the new, CSI Cincinnati or whatever. It is my hope that I can help those Black people get those jobs if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and that is even to that point, the person that wants to do it, the Black person that wants to do it specifically, that still doesn't mean that they don't, even though they want to write that type of show, doesn't mean that they aren't trying to bring in a fresh perspective or a fresh story. We also understand that TV is very formulated, because when you were talking about, it's either vanilla or chocolate, and occasionally it's butter pecan, TV, as we know, has a certain formula, just baseline, no matter who you are trying to write it. And when you can fit into that pocket of what has already been created, that also just helps them want to give you money. So there's the same point. If you are an individual who wants to continue writing on a particular show, that's one way to get in, or you can just recreate something that already exists. I just recently saw too where somebody compared The Nanny to Fresh Prince, and how they just pretty much documented how the formula was essentially the same, which is true, and TV inherently does that. What I'm also noticing is that, a lot, if you want really different content, I feel like go to the web. Everything now is streaming for the most part, but even that is loaded. When I say go to the web, there is still clearly bad content, still things that are not really good on there. But I bring it up to say that is also a lane where artists can just go and create, and people do find you there. Lots of people are getting deals from content that they're putting on the web. So it's definitely, all of it is a both, meaning that if you want to be on these popular shows, figure out how to write and get in that, and there you go. But you can also have a sustainable career creating content on the internet, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever, and not ever touch TV or features, at this point.
Absolutely. I'm really excited by particularly a lot of young queer creatives and the work they're doing on the web and in new media. And anything from uploading videos to YouTube to, 1-minute things on TikTok, right? I think about someone like Ryan Ken, who, can either parlay his success on one platform into larger opportunities. So yeah, I think we should not neglect the newer models that are out there. One thing that I say to emerging filmmakers, whether it's TV or film, is you don't have to wait for someone to say yes to you. You
Right.
absolutely need to be creating, and you need to be making now.
Yes.
You know, so it is not simply a matter of I'm going to, you know, work on my laptop and I'm going to produce like script after script, and you know, I will try and send it out and get, you know, someone to say yes to me and buy it and whatever. You need to be filming shorts now. You need to be in community with other filmmakers, meeting directors, meeting people who want to learn how to produce, meeting, you know, aspiring cinematographers. You need to be creating those networks now and making things out. It makes it that much easier for you to sell something when it's time, but it also gives you a sense of ownership of things. I can say that many studios, production companies, they are actively looking for IP. So they're looking for things that currently exist.
Mhm.
Podcasts, books. The project that I'm working on is an adaptation, and I mean loose adaptation of the middle grade book that I co-wrote, that, you know, is transforming into something else. That was a nonfiction work. It's being adapted now into a narrative limited series. You know, but they are looking for things that exist already. You know, that they can then monetize and that they can, you know, grow. So I would say, like, don't wait. Whether you're creating a short for, you know, $60, or whether you're able to find $5,000, you know, for an awesome sizzle reel, like, you need to be making stuff now that people can actually see.
That brings into a good segue about resources and emerging filmmakers. With labs, we have been able to connect with the Black community here and others, like I was saying before, and being able to provide resources to those who want to, you know, create films. And I feel like it's a blessing. Like, I just thoroughly enjoy that we get to meet all these Black people and just be able to say, here, have this thing, go forth and make whatever you want to do. And that's not, you know, obviously always the case. And then also to your point of not of what you don't know, like what you don't know and trying to figure that out, that's, you know, just a thing in itself, and those ways to fill those gaps, because we have had many people on these conversations, and one thing I definitely felt through some of them is like, yeah, I went to school, I got that degree, but where was the representation? Where were the people that look like me? Where were the connecting points for me to be able to translate this work, you know, this degree into the work, you know, that I want to do? And many people, even including myself, you know, you kind of fall off. Fortunately, you know, I was able to get back into film and things that I enjoy, and it was always, you know, in my brain. But that's not everybody's, you know, situation, and a lot of times that is due to, you know, lack of resources or accessibility.
Yeah, I'm gonna put in the chat a link that we always send people to, which is Sundance Inclusion and Resource Map. It is fantastic. If not, you know, anyone watching this, if you have not gone to this page to see all of the resources that the Sundance Institutes have compiled for people from underserved communities, you really need to check it out. Because it is, I mean, I won't say it's comprehensive. The list is dynamic. It's always changing. You can always be connecting to other organizations, you know, other communities, other people. But it's a great place to start. When I say, like, you just need to get out there and start doing things, it may mean that you apply for $500 from this place, and one place gives you $200, and someplace else gives you a grant of $1,000. But that's part of the hustle, you know? And it takes time and it takes effort, and sometimes you can be tired, you know, but that's part of the game at this point. And I think if we can learn to celebrate that kind of DIY aspect of it, there's something really freeing about that. And thinking, like, this is allowing me to create art that is all me, that I own. And I don't mean own, you know, necessarily just tangibly, but like own emotionally, as opposed to being dictated to from, you know, the top down. I think, you know, it's something we can be excited by. So I always encourage people to go to this inclusion resource map from Sundance and use this as a jumping off place to find ways to make a space for yourself in the industry, in the field, if you don't want to be in the industry, but you still want to be a creative, and that's valid too. Not everybody wants to move to LA or New York or whatever and, you know, create films and do this stuff, like, and there needs to be a space for those folks too. But start with those things because you're not alone. You know, none of us are in isolation. There are communities, there are networks, there are, you know, online neighborhoods, there are writing groups, there are directing cohorts, there are other people like you who are in this on this journey. And you just need to find them. You know, I thank God for, you know, things like Open Signal Labs and, you know, being like, oh, Rashonda reached out to me after coming to a Black Member Forum event at Women in Film, and now we're connected, and, you know, we may be able to, this relationship hopefully will flower and we'll do something more and bigger. And that's the kind of like peer-to-peer lateral networking that I think people often discount. So yes, if you can get on, you know, Shonda Rhimes' schedule, good for you, God bless. Please tell me how you did it. But A, that's rare. B, Shonda Rhimes has the same 24 hours in her day that I have in my day. So if she's doing XYZ kind of things, even if she were my mentor, there's only so much she is going to be able to give me. Yes, it's going to be intensely valuable, but there's only going to be so much that she's able to give me, right? But when you're talking about peer-to-peer or lateral networking, you know, you're talking about being in community with people who are at your level or around your level. You're boosting each other up. You're keeping an eye out for opportunities for each other. And it allows for movement then, you know, above a more, you know, viable kind of stepping stone to people at those elevated levels who can potentially hire you or make connections for you, et cetera. It is much easier to be like, oh yeah, you know what, Rashonda's my girl. So, you know, she's got a bomb script about, you know, 2 women drivers who are in love, right? I'm gonna make sure my boss sees that. And meanwhile, my boss is, you know, VP of development at ABC, right? It is much more likely that your script is gonna get on someone's desk because you've done that kind of lateral networking than you sending your script to the VP of development and hoping it goes somewhere, you know? And also, like, you know, we talk about making things. Yeah, if you're gonna take a weekend and just, you know, shoot a short, DIY it up, okay, just get your friends, you know, your buddies in and be like, I don't have money to pay you, but I got 2 cases of beer and I'll buy pizza for everybody. Or I can pay everybody $100 a day for this. You know, we need to, you know, keep our eye on the small steps, but also remember the benefits, you know, the fruitfulness that can come from those kind of collegial peer-to-peer relationships.
Like they say, give it the old college try. And if you didn't go to college, it's the same.
Right.
You got it.
Right. And I mean, how do you even know? I mean, you say you want to be a director, but you've never directed anything. How do you know you want to be a director when you actually get down to it? You say you want to be a writer, you've never completed a script. You know, like, at what point do you start actually doing the thing that you say that you are?
Yeah.
You know, you want to be a producer, go get some friends together and be like, hey, let's shoot this 2-minute thing. And I'm going to take care of, you know, finding the space for it. I'm going to take care of, you know, getting people for the crew. I'm going to say X, Y, and Z, right? What's stopping you from doing it? And if you can't do it at this level, what makes you think you can do it on a $40 million project? Like, come on, we got to be real with each other.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So you, Ebony, you mentioned earlier about union writers. You're talking about how Tyler Perry doesn't use union writers. So quickly, can you just, what's the value in the process of being a union writer? What benefits are there for me? Yeah. How do I do that? How's that work?
So I don't want to, let me preface this by saying, please folks, just, you know, go to WGA.org and check out the requirements to be a member of WGA at different levels. So you can be a full member, you can be an associate member. And this is a conversation we were having earlier with Rashonda and Jeff about some programming I'm trying to do on Black hair and makeup artists. There is there's some gatekeeping involved in membership. It's not just something you can sign up for. So you need to have a certain amount of units / credits to get into the WGA, and there's a cost. I think it's $2,500 to get in. So you know, it's not just like you fill out an application today and write a check. God bless you if you do got $2,500 just floating around, but you know, a lot of us don't. But so it's, you know, have you sold something? Have you sold a script? Have you sold a TV show? Have you done, you know, a web series with a WGA signatory, et cetera? So there are, you know, they're pretty clear about their requirements, but it's not something that you can just jump into from nowhere. But if you are a WGA writer, it means you can command higher salaries. It means that there's a level of protection available to you. You know, when you're a member of these guilds and unions, you're also sometimes eligible for like healthcare, for pensions, et cetera. So it's the difference between, this is a bad analogy, but I'm gonna go with it anyway, being like a contractor versus being an employee of an organization. You know how there's the difference there between, you know, what they can and can't do, the kind of protections that you have, the benefits and the perks that are available to you. You know, it is, and yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to, you know, Tyler Perry Productions, you have to pay more money for a WGA writer. And so he didn't get to be a billionaire with, you know, the Tyler Perry empire, you know, in Atlanta, just handing out money. So hopefully, and I think things are changing. I think there has been a lot of industry blowback on the fact that he has, you know, across his many productions, and there are so many, that there has been this antipathy to having union writers. So hopefully that's changing, but for right now, I believe that's still the case, that there are many productions.
So quick follow-up question, do folks in the industry look at union writers above, or is their work more valuable? Does it get less gatekeeping than a non-union writer? Or, you know what I mean? That's really kind of what I'm trying to get at. Is my work more likely to be looked at or accepted on spec or whatever if it's a union from a union
there are
person?
probably many more doors that are going to be open to you if you are a member, but it's not necessary to get a job. No.
Okay.
And if it is, you know, necessary, they will make that clear. But I mean, you know, if you're someone who's never sold something before, but you've written a couple of specs, or you've written, you know, a couple of original pilots, you get a manager, an agent, whatever. No, you don't need to be a WGA writer to go on the market, as it were, to have your stuff submitted. But I think the part of the understanding is, if you have gotten to the level at which WGA membership is something that you have, it is a guarantee that you've gotten a certain level of experience, that you've been in the industry for a certain amount of time, that, you know, more than one production has you know, vouched for the quality of your work, et cetera. So it's, you know, in some ways like a stamp of approval. And I'm oversimplifying this. I guarantee you there are people who are going to be watching this recording and be like, she's got this all wrong. Let me tell you about the ins and outs of the politics of the WGA. But yeah, I mean, it is too easy to exploit new writers when they are not in the union. And the basic fundamental of it is often comes down to money. You can pay them less.
Before we started, you were talking about, I think, Women in Film and the Blacklist doing something for writers. I wonder if you could talk about that pathway a little bit as a screenwriter. Like, how do you like make it to that peak where you can be a WG writer? I see more, especially lately, there have been more diverse opportunities for like writer's assistants and things like that. Are there pathways that you recommend?
Yeah, it is always, you know, a helpful stepping stone if you can point to participation in a program. You know, I'll talk about Women in Film and the Blacklist just because that's the organization that I'm part of, but Sundance, Episodic Lab, you know, Film Fatale, AFI, they're directing workshops, etc. If you can get into one of these programs, you've taken one step. So it's that much easier for people in the industry, agents, managers, etc., to find you, because many organizations will send out a press release, for instance. Here's the 2021 class of the Women in Film Blacklist Episodic Lab, right? So these are people whose work has been vetted. We believe they show incredible promise. So that's the kind of thing that will go on your CV that helps you stand out. Things like, the Warner Brothers Fellowship, the Disney ABC Fellowship, all of those things. And for anyone watching who's like, okay, what are these things? There are tons of writers' resources and calendars out there. I have one myself. Lots of writers keep them. And it's just a calendar of the year, like January 2nd, Nichols Fellowship due. May, Sundance Episodic Lab. It's useful to start keeping those lists for you, but I'm happy to share mine. Please hit me up. I love more. We need more of us submitting to these things. But you're starting from a huge mass of people, aspiring writers. You take it to the next level, people who've gotten into a program. The next level, people maybe who are returning to the program, or the people who've demonstrated that they've got some level of skill and promise, right? So it is not uncommon for people to write us at Women in Film, for instance, and say, I'm looking for this kind of project. I'm looking to meet with people who are doing work in, who are writing like supernatural limited series, or someone who's working on a comedy specifically for a Latinx cast, We get those kind of requests, and the folks that we turn to first are the ones who have gone through our programs. So it's a stepping stone for people, but it also makes it that much easier, again, for folks to find you, because that is how, when folks are looking for new clients, agents and managers, et cetera, that's often where they start, is people who are part of these programs.
Nice. Belka, Ashley, is there anything you all want to add? This is so great, Ebony, and I also appreciate all the resources that you are also open to share.
I love it. So I think that Ashley, who is off camera right now, is my colleague at Women in Film. I'm not going to call her out more than I've already done, but she always gets at me, because I'll do these events, whether it's, a Women in Film event or whether it's someone else's event. And at the end, I'm always like, please hit me up. I want to talk to people. I want to have coffee with you. I want to, meet. And then after, she'll be like, you do not like people. Why do you always say that? You lying to yourself and you're lying to others. But the answer is, I like talking to people about this, about the art, but also I will talk to Black people all the time. So yeah,
I can see why it's different.
About the industry, you can hit me up about, if you want me to read something, you're just looking for a reader, if you have a question that maybe I can answer, or if I can't answer, but I can put you in touch with someone. I'll talk to Black people all day, Black creatives. It's the other folks that I might have less time for.
Yes, that's a word.
I know Ashley is laughing at me right now, but I don't care. I'm serious. Hit me up. But definitely, if you're interested in the calendar of contests, fellowships, programs, labs, etc., hit me up. I'll send that to you. It's a Google sheet, so I'll just share it with you.
Nice. I kind of want to go back to some of our earlier conversation, because it lends to the world of what type of industry we are creating, what type of industry we want to be, a part of. And I know you've said some of this, you've expressed some of this, but to you, what would the industry look like? If you could just shape it however you would like to see it, or mold it, what would it start looking like to you? Or what would it look like to you?
I would love it if a city like Portland, with the great work that you're doing there, could continue to nurture the creatives that you have, and where folks could feel like, I can live and work in Portland or Davenport, Iowa, or whatever, and still be part of creating the media that people are watching. That's one thing, the kind of hyper local work that is still concentrated in New York, LA, Vancouver, Atlanta, but still, if you're not in one of those spots, to feel as if you cannot be part of this creative movement. I would like for that to go away. I would like for people to feel as if the kind of trial by fire that so many folks have to go through at the lower levels is unacceptable. So you talk about, Scott Rudin's assistants, actors who've worked with Harvey Weinstein, just the kind of abuse that people endure because there's someone in power over them who has been given carte blanche and permission time and time again to behave just egregiously and criminally. I would like, as an industry, for us to recognize how unacceptable that is, and for us to no longer allow these so-called geniuses to disrupt and destroy people's lives. I mean, that's a huge thing. It's not anything that's going to happen
like overnight,
tomorrow or next month. But I ask myself, and we ask ourselves at Women in Film, okay, yes, we want more women in the screen industries, but do I want them in an abusive, exploitative industry? No, I don't want to send anybody into the lion's den. I don't want to send any new writer, get them a job as a staff writer somewhere, and then have them like relentlessly bullied by a showrunner. And that stuff is rife, So we need to clean up our act before we address this equity. Like, where are we actually sending people? I would love for there to be more realization that we are human. A lot of us are caregivers, our parents, so the days of working 18 hours in a writer's room or on set, that's unsustainable, nor should it be. I would like for there to be, more awareness of that. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a parent. It's not sustainable for anybody, for any human being, I have ideas about the way, like deals are made, but I just fundamentally, I want us to reimagine what it means to be creative, divorce some of our expectations from the needs of the market, and recenter the people involved. It feels very lofty, but I feel like now is a time for us to do this. We came from, as I said, this very anomalous year, and a lot of people are asking these questions, doing writers' rooms on Zoom. Oh, word. Okay, so you're saying instead of being, locked up in a conference room with, smelly folks for 16 hours, I can actually get the work done from 9 to 1, and I'm in the comfort of my own home, and we're still producing quality writing. Okay, well then why would we ever go back to the other version? Why can't, can we do a hybrid is, a question. There's something called French hours on film sets, right? Like, again, how do we just demonstrate that there's an awareness of and a celebration of the fact that there are people behind these things, and the better you treat them, the better the artwork that comes out of them.
Can you explain French hours?
This is something you're gonna have to look up, but it's basically about setting, it's about setting the hours such that they don't go on too long on set. And it's something that has been put in place specifically for, or many people who celebrate it are specifically parents in the industry. So it's like, I can't be on set from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., right? And so someone like Marielle Heller, for instance, really champions the use of French hours on, so it's about setting aside a certain amount of time for like, designated lunches or breaks or whatever, but ending at a certain time and knowing that things are gonna be stopping at a certain time. That's the basic version of it.
Yeah. No, this is great. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And what you're saying too, I feel like a lot of people are trying to just apply that to life, meaning that being more intentional, more humanism, as you say, and then just also the dismantling, like not just this is the first word that came to mind, but like the hustle culture, like we all know capitalism. I shouldn't say we all so quickly, but many of us know how capitalism has, alongside white supremacy, has definitely done a lot of things to our detriment. And the more we get out of that and become more aware of the things that we actually need and what feels right for us, and being able to like express that, and also hopefully healthy environments that helps. But baseline as a person, if you can express that like this is too much, this is not right, and all of those things, that's definitely helping shift the culture.
Right.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think my final thing would be getting us away from a certain kind of metric analysis. So I mentioned this new UCLA study that just came out, and I'm really disheartened by the framing. I think the research and the work is admirable and very necessary, but I'm disheartened by some of the framing that continues to appear in these kinds of studies about, the numbers of Black directors, or the number of queer producers, or the number of, disabled folks in front of the camera, et cetera, right? Because they continue to frame it in terms of representation as a segment of the US population. So they'll say, oh, well, there's really nothing to celebrate because, there was only 4% of the lead characters on primetime dramas were women, and women are 51% of the population. Or, Black people were represented only 9% of the showrunners, but they're 12% of the population. I want to explode that. The idea that if we get to 12%, we have done our jobs. Black people are 12% of the population. So if we have 12% of the jobs and we're on screen 12% of the time, that the work is done. No. And I think there's too much kind of playing around with that belief that people really do assume that you can assign a number to how art works. What would it mean if we were in, you turned on your TV, you turned on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, whatever, and 87% of the art that was available to you was not white centered, irrespective of the numbers of the population. What could it be? So I have a lot of trouble with the kind of metrics-based analysis of our industry as a function of, some sort of like population breakdown. I really think it betrays really kind of limited thinking that it takes us nowhere or offers really easy solutions,
Bialika, did you have a question?
I was just going to jump in at a couple points, but so much has been said that's really brilliant. I think in this last exchange, there's something about the representation also just staying at a really superficial level, that the stories themselves are reproducing the same, predictable narrative. So it doesn't even matter how much representation there is if the stories themselves aren't fluctuating beyond the norm. So what I'd like to see is a much more radical, creative output that doesn't even trouble itself with the mainstream. This is what we've been seeing, so we're just going to keep replicating that. I mean, who wants to do that? And I also, Ebony, really appreciated the distinction you made between being in the field and being in the industry, because the industry is primed for that kind of bring in the same thing that we've been seeing all along. Whereas you can be in the field and be truly creative. And I think we need more of those imaginative storylines to just explode the expectations of what we're willing to pay for, what we're willing to consume, which is putting the onus both on the audience as well as the creative. So I think we as a collective also need to be more conscientious about what it is that we're willing to take in and what we're demanding. We want to see more of those imaginative productions that don't replicate what we've seen over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is an exciting time in that the models of distribution they're still opaque, but there are new avenues for people to get their work out there in ways that have not existed before. So you have, the standard example is someone like Issa Rae, right? So she does the misadventures of an awkward Black girl, and now, she's this force to be reckoned with, writer, performer, producer, etc. But even if she had not done all of that, she just put her videos together and, slapped them up online, right? And her audience found her, which is not to say you can just put stuff on there and just hope that, an audience will come to you. It may, but, you're gonna have to do some marketing. You're gonna have to send it out there. But the fact is, an audience found her. That would not have been possible 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So yeah, you could have, you know, made little films, you know, reel to reel, whatever, but that stuff would have stayed in your basement, you know, and then your grandkids would have found it. Now there is an avenue for that, a tremendous, you know, democratization of media creation that we should be grabbing hold of. And I do think young people in particular have recognized this, and this is the world in which, this is the only world they've known.
Yes.
It's the only world that, you know, they've grown up in. And so they expect it now. I don't think they would sit still for the traditional models of doing things. I think they are eager to create, remix, reshape things into what they want, and they will get it out there. And they have their own communities, their own conversations about these things. They don't care if Netflix is listening. They don't care, you know, but in their crew, that's what they're watching. That's what they're listening to. That's what they're doing, you know? I love that. I love that.
No, it's very innovative, and I do too. I just like to see. I like, in a ways, how social media has helped us be able to create, and I definitely like to see what people are making. Like, it's fascinating. But I feel like we are getting a little close to time. Not to rush anybody, but you know, if you all have other questions, Ebony, if you have other things you want to share, definitely. But this has been really, really good, really powerful.
This is so great. Listen, Rashonda, I can't express to you how grateful I was to have another opportunity to shut my mouth off and talk about this industry that I love and hate all at the same time. But I'm gonna put my email address in the chat too, so feel free to share that with people. Hit me up if you have questions about women in film, if you have questions about maybe other organizations that I can, you know, direct you to, maybe make connections. I'm happy to do this. I'm not satisfied with 12%. I want us to be 99%. So anything I can do to help more Black creatives, let me know. And if I can't do it, maybe I can find someone who will, or someone who can.
And like I was saying earlier, y'all, I just sent her an email, she replied, and here she is. So, yeah. You know.
And now I'm gonna be blowing up her inbox all the time. So
you know, we can become friends
when you reach out to me, but once you start, I can't stop.
It's cool. I'm into it. I like it.
Thanks so much, Ebony. This has been great.
Yes.
And please hit me up so that we can have a conversation about Lovecraft Country and about Black horror.
Oh, I would love to.
I absolutely would love that.
Yeah. We might have to also connect you with Summer Martin. She's a Black director here who focuses on horror.
I love it. I love it. You know?
More conversations about Black horror, please. Yes. And for anybody who's watching who's wondering where Afani is, he got a second vaccine shot and he's feeling a little under the weather. So that's why he's not here. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and hit me up if you ever want to talk.
Thank you, Ebony. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Elijah.